Welcome back, everyone, and let's get to our second conversation for today. So, President Muhammadu Buhari is not happy with the situation of things in Afghanistan, and he has his fears. He put them into writing in an opinion article published in Financial Times yesterday. President Buhari said, while the world is preoccupied with curbing the spread of COVID-19, terrorism is worsening. The president's article was centered on the crisis unfolding in Afghanistan. The Taliban is taking over power in that country after capturing all the major cities there. The president went further to say, quote, the Sahel remains vulnerable to Boko Haram 20 years after its formation and other radical groups. Somalia is in its second decade fighting the equally extreme Al-Shabaab. Many African nations are submerged under the weight of insurgency. As Africans, we face a day of reckoning, just as some sense the West is losing its will for the fight. It is true that some of our Western allies are bruised by their Middle Eastern and Afghan experiences. Others face domestic pressures after the pandemic. Africa was not then, and even less now, their priority. If Afghanistan has taught us a lesson, it is that although sheer force can blunt terror, its removal can cause a threat to return. End of quote. Those are the words of President Buhari in the opinion piece published by Financial Times. So, the bottom line of this conversation is that what does a president mean? It does look like there are fears that the president is raising through this. The war is being fought since 2009 when Boko Haram reared its head, ugly head at that, in Nigeria, killing and maiming innocent Nigerians. How far have we gone in that war? But for what President Buhari said today, a message to the West. What are they going to listen and what are they going to do? The president also mentioned advanced weaponry to help and aid the fight against terror in this part of the world. Tonight, let's get the experience and the knowledge of Professor Oyebode, a professor of international law. Prof, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for coming tonight on the program. First and foremost, if you may, I know you, the PIB is an area of interest because it's law. Maybe you have an interest in or something that you would like to say about the president signing the PIB after so many years that this being a major cause of debate.
Thank you very much, Sheung, for having me. Let me begin by saying that, like you said, the passage of the PIB is a step in the right direction. The act is subject to amendment as the issue arises because it's not a perfect enactment. For instance, the dichotomy between so-called oil-producing areas and production areas, which includes part of Nigeria through which pipelines pass, that dichotomy is difficult to sustain. I think we have to recognize that what we really have are oil-bearing areas. They are not oil-producing, it's just areas which bear oil. And the relationship between the international oil companies and the oil-bearing communities needs to be straightened out. 3% is a pittance for those who suffer the encumbrances of producing oil, the concomitant effect of ravage of the environment, and then the fact of the unpleasantness of heat coming from fires, and also cancer, and in fact, birth defects and other things ravaging people inhabiting the area need to be compensated for. we all agree that the oil-bearing areas are the geese that lay the golden eggs. So they have to survive, and they have to be cushioned and defended from the vagaries of oil production. Trying to smuggle in people over whose territory oil pipelines pass, I think it's been clever by half. We must be able to separate issues. But as your previous speakers opined, this is a good beginning. We'll see how far it goes. It's taken such a long time to have the PIB, so we should not throw away the baby, as people say, with the bath water. So it's a fine place to start to see whether we need further amendments of the PIB going forward in order to make progress. That is all I have to say for now.
All right.
Now, as regards the situation in Afghanistan, I must say that the Taliban are unrepentant terrorists, and there's no way a leopard can change its spots. They have made all manner of claims that they are born-again Taliban, but I don't believe them. And from the footage we have seen from the global media, it seems that the more things appear to change, the more they remain the same. Only a fool would trust the Taliban if they said they are put on a new toga, and we should give them the benefit of the doubt. Apart from that, the Taliban have impacted negatively on the African continent. Their allies like Al-Shabaab, for instance, in Somalia, and the ISWA, Islamic State in West Africa, and also the Boko Haram are such that we cannot afford to sleep with our two eyes because of the threat posed by these cantankerous opinion makers in Nigeria.
Okay, great. I love how you've helped to define the Taliban and what they stand for. And perhaps for our viewers tonight who are getting to understand how far these guys can go or their history, they've gotten a first-hand information from someone who is in the know. But Prof, looking at what has happened in Somalia, Libya over the past years, and how that has fueled crises on our shores and increased the deaths and the killings of innocent Nigerians, the opinion piece that President Buhari wrote in the Financial Times yesterday, I'd like to get your view on his fears.
Well, I believe the president is spot on in expressing anxiety about the fight against terrorism. I don't agree with him, though, that the West has succumbed to terrorism. I remember 6 years ago, there was a big conference on terrorism in Oxford, to which I was invited. And then we all agreed that you cannot have a conference on terrorism anywhere in the world without factoring in the Boko Haram. The Boko Haram are supposed to be the third most vicious terrorist group anywhere in the world. And the consensus was that something had to be done to contain the Boko Haram. I remember my friend, the late Festus Yayi, was at that conference too, and he gave a historical treatment on the evolution of the Boko Haram and how they've become almost too hot to handle. Now, I'm saying this because definitely we've been fighting the war against Boko Haram for the past 12 years. And we were told that they've been degraded, they've almost been defeated, they no longer occupy any areas unlike before, when they had control over a number of local governments in Borno State. Apart from the loss of Shekau, their leader, recently, it seems, and then the surrender of quite a number of their fighters, it seems that we still have a long way to go. We still have a long way to go in terms of the fight against the Boko Haram. The Boko Haram are supposed to be in alliance with ISWA. And once the Boko Haram hears that the Taliban are going to declare an emirate, an Islamic emirate of Afghanistan, they will be excited because part of their game plan is to declare an Islamic emirate or a sultanate over Nigeria. Unfortunately for them, and unfortunately for us, Nigeria is a more complex kettle of fish than Afghanistan. We are not homogeneous, unlike the Afghan people. We have a multiplicity of religions in this country. We have a multilingual, multicultural country. So it's almost asking for the impossible to be dreaming and wishing into effect an Islamic emirate of Nigeria. Right now, the Christians have alleged that they are being massacred, that there's some sort of genocide against them, waged by extreme Islamic forces, especially in the northern part of the country. But I don't think that the declaration of Nigeria as an Islamic emirate is in the offing. I don't believe it. But that does not mean that we should not continue the struggle against the terrorists. Because, like it or not, Boko Haram, at the time they were called the third most violent terrorist organization in the world. They've, of course, lost some ground, but that is not to say that they still don't pose a threat, not only to Nigeria, but neighboring countries like Chad, like Cameroon, and to some extent Niger. Aside from that, the Sahel, especially the Islamic terrorist group in the Maghreb, who want to have a belt of Islamic states in West Africa, will feel emboldened by what has been happening in Afghanistan in the last week or so. So I agree with General Buhari that Nigeria needs as many friends as it can attract, especially for the supply of armaments, material, to prosecute the war against terrorism. I know the French are in Mali. They are also joining forces with the government of Mali. I know the Americans have an American force for Africa, headquartered in Germany. I know also that the British Army has been training some of our soldiers in order to strengthen our response to the thrust of Islamic terrorism in our country. But I'm saying President Buhari is definitely correct to seek more help and friends from like-minded forces across the world. That is not to say that we have to allow the West to have bases in Nigeria. From what I read from the article, President Buhari believes that we have the men to do the fight. All we need is support, material support, diplomatic support, in fact, strategic support in the sense of satellite imaging, things that will help the Nigerian struggle to contain the ogre of terrorism. Things, of course, that we need to take charge of space in order to provide things that will strengthen the geostrategic location of Nigeria. Drones, for instance, should be supplied or should be acquired as much as we can in order to help us focus, narrow the thrust on the Boko Haram and break the rapprochement that seems to exist between Boko Haram and the ordinary people. We have to win the hearts and minds of people in the theaters of conflict, that the struggle against Boko Haram is in their own interests, that the life they save might be their own lives. In other words, we should not allow other Nigerians to think that it's just a struggle to be waged by the Nigerian military. We need to win the civilian population against the Boko Haram and any threats to the stability of Nigeria. But it's beyond that. Nigeria occupies a unique position on the African continent. 1 out of every 6 Africans is a Nigerian. And then we are not just making a claim of being a giant. When you look at other African countries, they look at us with respect, and not fear, but respect. Even our rival for influence in Africa, South Africa, knows that if push comes to shove, Nigeria will outsmart them any day. We have the requisite know-how and experience, combat experience, to ensure that we don't yield any space to terrorists. Terrorism, as I said, is a thrust against the peace and security of mankind. And there are enough treaties and international engagements to ensure that terrorism does not thrive. So I think we have to recognize the thrust of President Buhari's article soliciting help and understanding from other forces in order to ensure that Africa is free.
Some will opine that the sense behind America's military presence outside of America is some kind of part of their international diplomatic policy of warding off terror on their shores after the 9/11. And perhaps when a general like President Buhari comes out to say, quote, as Africans, we face our day of reckoning, just as some sense that the West is losing its will for the fight. I'm hoping that those words is not mincing at all. He meant every word in that sentence. If he says that, Africa will face our day of reckoning, what do you make of this, and how do you hope that we can get out of the possible fears that President Buhari has for the future?
Well, it seems to me that President Buhari is opining that we, as Africans, have a rendezvous with history. We have to stand up to the call of history to defend, our territory. We cannot yield Africa to forces that don't mean well for us. And I don't believe that United States of America is withdrawing to its lager. I believe their interests, American interests in Africa, which America recognizes and which it must help defend. Now, I know it's 20 years since we had the debacle with Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was devastated by the elimination of Osama bin Laden during the Obama years. But the resurgence of the Taliban in Afghanistan gives one the impression that the Al-Qaeda might be resurrected because, you know, Osama bin Laden was got in Pakistan. And if a country like Afghanistan, which is geostrategically situated, harbors evil forces like Al-Qaeda or even the Islamic groups that want an inroad into Africa, we have to make sure that that does not succeed. The United States recently bombed some of the forces of the terrorists in Somalia and giving them a bloody nose. I'm talking of the Al-Shabaab, which has caused tremendous difficulty for countries like Kenya and countries like Ethiopia. That tells me that United States will stand up to join forces with whoever is prepared to save Africa from becoming, you know, a stronghold of Islamic terrorism. But people might look at President Buhari's anguish with a pinch of salt. We have in Nigeria a minister that is said to have had connections with Al-Qaeda. He says he's a repented supporter or defender of Al-Qaeda, but I don't see what a man like that is doing in the cabinet of Nigeria. We have people in this country that have sympathies for Al-Qaeda. For instance, American intelligence revealed that the day of the attack of the towers, there was a strange call from a phone booth in Kano to Al-Qaeda, maybe supporting them or what have you, that Al-Qaeda has some support in Nigeria, some cells, some silent cells, and that even in Nigeria, many of the people we see who operate as Okada riders and Megad and what have you, they are sympathizers of or silent defenders of the Boko Haram. In other words, our job is not yet done as far as containing terrorism. Yeah. It's at times like this that I miss the death of my good friend Donai Homo, who is a thoroughbred in terrorism and all these matters. But Nigeria must not believe that we have come to the end of what we can do to restrain terrorism in our country.
Professor Oyebode, it's always a pleasure listening to you. It does look like one is reading an interesting textbook and knowledge is just playing off page by page. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight and the thoughts that you have shared. I appreciate it, Prof.
You're most welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, sir. Well, that's our show for today, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Chinua Kimberley. Bye for now.